Do any of you happen to know a show-off? Have you ever been called a show-off before? Have you ever been called such a thing or called someone else such a thing? This phenomenon of showing off first came to my attention as a child at back-to-school time. Where I grew up, going back to school meant showing off your new look. For the kids with means, that first day was more an opportunity to show off your new jeans for class, your new shoes for gym, and maybe even your new friends for the new year you. I was not immune myself from a little bit of showing off. I remember one year I arrived on the first day of school with a shiny new pair of Air Jordans. They were sleek, high tops with a cool Air Jordan insignia on the back. Now never mind, mine were last year's design, and that the only way my mother bought my pitch was that they happened to be on sale. But all that did not matter to me when I strolled out on the playground that first day. They were new and cool in my book. I remember the day well. I felt like I floated through most of the day until a classmate stopped me and said, "Hey, nice shoes, dude, but those are last year's." He stopped me dead in my tracks, and I braced myself for what might come next. Going retro, I see. Sweet man. And I happily nodded along. That's right, sweet man. Now we all like some recognition once in a while. It feels good to be admired and respected. Whether you dress to impress or find another way to turn heads, we live in a culture that is doing its best to perfect the art of self-promotion. Although you might be used to this phenomenon in the secular world, we expect higher standards from religious professionals. If anyone is above the self-promotional fray, it should be us, right? I mean, who do we have to impress anyway? Besides Pastor Campbell, I have only one boss to please, or perhaps three, depending on your theology of the Trinity. And yet, it is precisely the religious professionals that Jesus can be the hardest on. In the passage we read today from Matthew's Gospel, Jesus rags on the scribes and Pharisees for how they loved to be seen by others, have grown accustomed to the places of honor at banquets, and love the best seats in synagogues. Now, throughout Matthew's Gospel, Jesus directs his followers to do as the scribes and Pharisees say, but not as they do. This might sound familiar to some of us with mothers who say, "Do as I say, and not as I do." But for these followers of Jesus, their righteousness was to exceed, we are told, that of the scribes and Pharisees, whom Jesus chastised for failing to practice what they preached. Now, to draw his contrast between what he's saying to his followers and the scribes and Pharisees, Jesus uses some provocative language, such as, "The greatest among you will be your servants, and those who are humble will be exalted." At first blush, when I hear such sayings, I must admit that they sound nice, but perhaps too idealistic, like they're more fit for somewhere over the rainbow, more fit for that place rather than the real culture we live in, a culture that is flush with promotions. Some of us may even wonder today whether these kinds of sayings of Jesus are really that relevant at all. And if so, how in the real places where we live? The passage we read today is part of what scholars call Jesus' final discourse. This is the last series of teachings he will give, before entering the saga of his last week on earth, his trial and crucifixion. In these teachings, Jesus tries to prepare his disciples for the conflict that is to come and to help illustrate for them his primary purpose in ministry. You might liken this to something of a last talk or a final speech or cliff notes of what to remember before Jesus makes his exit. Today, as we read, he reminds the gathered crowd in Jerusalem that having a pious form is not enough. Seeking the will of God requires something more of us. Looking the part will not do. Now, this is not to say that Jesus is unconcerned with religious law or pious form. He begins this address today by validating the authority of the scribes and Pharisees. He says they sit on Moses' seat and they have legitimate claim to that seat, and therefore you should do whatever they teach you and follow it. The problem, however, is that the religious law itself, in the hands of authority figures who are not practicing, seeking to embody what it teaches, the problem emerges when there becomes a disconnect in that place. When law is disconnected from practice, we can't help but wonder if this is all just an exercise in pretension. In the movie The Last Kiss, featuring Zach Braff, any Scrubs fans in the house today? Zach Braff is featured as a 38-year-old man named Michael, and he is shown in the midst of a midlife, or I guess you could say quarter-life crisis of sorts. He has just turned 30, but has an adolescent soul, facing the stress of fully entering adult life, settling down and coming to terms with the loss of his innocence. He is newly engaged to be married, and he feels pressured by cultural expectations to buy a house and take on all the family trappings that come with it. And as the film unfolds, Michael becomes increasingly overwhelmed and confused while he stares at all these obligations of adult life in the face. He feels trapped and afraid, and he looks for some way to escape. The turning point in this film comes when Michael seeks advice from his father-in-law, who says to him, "Michael, what you feel inside matters only to you. It is what you do to the people you say you love that counts. It is what you do to the people you say you love that counts." Sound advice, perhaps, but if we are honest, we must confess that there's a bit of the Pharisee in each of us. We seek attention and accolades. We have at some point or another let someone down who depends on us. Rather advertently or inadvertently, we have hurt someone we say we love, and we know in our hearts that we love. And yet, imperfect as we are, this word of advice challenges us to express what love means beyond mere lip service. Like Jesus' words that we practice what we preach, this word of advice invites us to reflect on how well our own actions match our words. Friends, as a religious professional, I must say I am challenged by this passage today. Every Sunday I sit up front in this house of worship. I process and preach and teach. I like to be recognized when I walk in a room. I enjoy others' greetings, admiration, and respect. Is that such a bad thing? As social creatures, don't we all need a little recognition and admiration once in a while. I'm convinced the issue at stake in this passage is not our sociality or having a healthy ego, but rather our tendency to fall in love with the limelight, to not let it go. Maybe being honest with ourselves in this way is a step toward the kind of humility Jesus is talking about. For humility is, as a friend once told me, simply being honest with yourself. Honest about yourself, about who you are and who you are not. It is about being comfortable in your own skin and able to both receive and deflect attention. Whether you are noticed or not at the end of the day is not what is most important to a person who's comfortable in their own skin. Such humility as honesty helps me get closer to Jesus' vision of greatness when I finally learn that to get over myself is the step to really noticing others. Once, Jesus' disciples come to him asking this question: who among us will be the greatest in the kingdom of God? Turning, Jesus holds a toddler on his knee and says, whoever becomes like this child and welcomes children in my name will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. In this great reversal of expectation, Jesus cuts to the heart of his disciples' pretension and elevates the mildness of a child. For children, the significance of a moment is not determined by public opinion or what others are thinking of them in that moment. Instead, the beauty of childhood is that it affords us the luxury to live in the abundance of the present. But we all know that we cannot stay young. Eventually, our children grow up and join the other kids on the playground of the world, where many voices tell them who they should be and what kind of shoes they should wear and what they need to fit in and solidify their self-worth. Bombarded by these voices, it can be hard to recognize the Spirit's gentle whisper to each one of us that who you are is enough, and to whom you belong is perfect and unending love. This message, especially for us in the household of faith, is the whisper that we must hold on to. But it takes work to discern this whisper in the midst of so much noise. We may want to have eyes to see and ears to hear what the Spirit is saying, if only we knew what channel the Spirit was on and if the Spirit is available in instant streaming. But I must say, my friends, that the Spirit can get our attention when we least expect it, as it did for me last week on this block. As some of you know, this church offers a sandwich line ministry to the hungry and homeless in our neighborhood. Every Tuesday and Thursdays, volunteers come to this church to hand out sandwiches to those in need. And last week, I noticed a boy stopping on the sidewalk for a sandwich at 4 p.m. This time of day is very busy on this block as people whiz by, going home from work, coming to work, going on and off the subway, getting on and off the bus. And I almost did not recognize the kid when he stopped. I watched him for a moment as one of our volunteers handed him a bag lunch. The boy responded saying, "Thank you, and God bless." I kept watching him intrigued as he began to turn and walk away, and I saw that he noticed the few adults standing and still waiting in line. He stopped and turned toward them, smiled and pulled out of his pocket 5 or 6 lollipops and started to hand them out. He watched as smiles crossed the faces of those standing in that line, charmed by this simple act of kindness. God bless you, too, he said. And he turned and went on his way. This, brothers and sisters, is why I am a minister. And this is the vision that we share as ministers together. Moments such as these are what keep us going in faith. Though rarely broadcast, moments like these can be powerful precisely because there's such a lack of fanfare. No one seemed to notice. I do not know this kid's name, but I do know what he did that day. And I remembered in that moment is what we do to the people we say we love that counts. Such tender moments, such childlike moments, remind us to stay alert, to recognize the Spirit of the God of grace, who is always looking for an opportunity to show off goodness and kindness, to show off mercy and compassion, to show off generosity and justice. A righteousness, my friends, that exceeds that of the religious professionals, the scribes and Pharisees, comes from our hearts that are playgrounds of the Spirit among us. Back at my alma mater, the University of Sioux Falls, a phrase hangs on the library outside in big black letters that reads simply, "Culture for service." It is secured in plain view for all the students and faculty as they whiz by the class, offices, and dorms. It's there for all of us to see. And it was a reminder for me in college that no matter what your field or area of study, no matter what your goals or dreams for your life, no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, find your own purpose in ministry. If you teach well. If you consult well. If you sing well, and do all for the glory of God. And don't worry about making mistakes, because you most certainly will. You may even find recognition and awards, accolades. And that is okay, but inside we know that ultimately self-exaltation is not the point. The point is finding our purpose in ministry. And this is why we worship, friends. This is why we worship the God of grace, the God of Jesus, who humbled himself, took on the form of a servant, and gave his life for us all, and who is now exalted in his humility, exalted to the highest heavens in splendor and glory forever and ever. And to this God be all glory.